Our evening of Letting the Blues Be Our Muse does continue now, and our first writer for this half, who's also a musician, is going to bring us a portrait of a blues musician who's inspired some of his own intriguing songwriting. Welcome to Dave Ramont.
Nice fade. You are unfired. This is called Blind Willie Johnson. It was raining pitchforks late one Saturday night as my partner in musical crime and I pulled out of Kalamazoo, abiding by our rule. If our gig was within 3 hours of home, we'd drive back afterwards. Unless, of course, we'd taken advantage of the venue's loose drink policy. We stopped for the standard provisions: maple bun, giant slim, coffee, and a half pint of Kessler's for the co-pilot, tasked with keeping the pilot awake. But on this dark night in the unrelenting rain, we understood that sleep would be hard to cheat. We fiddled with the radio dial, trolling for Blues Before Sunrise, the syndicated show that had escorted us home countless times, running from midnight to 5 a.m. Jackpot, frequency found, and tonight curator and host Steve Cushing was featuring Blind Willie Johnson, whom I was aware of, though somewhat uninitiated. The effects were immediate. Blind Willie's unearthly and guttural moans, doubling in unison his spooky, melancholic slide guitar lines, transfixed us in such a way as to steer us through the fog, wide-eyed, as if God and the devil had climbed in the back seat, while the rain drew ghostly faces on the hood. In January of 1897 or thereabouts, Willie Johnson entered this world outside of Waco, Texas, where the sky is wide, the vegetation spiteful, and the ground hardly suitable for slumber. Fire ants and mesquite, scrub oak and scorpions. In my experience, Central Texas always seemed a place to harbor spooks and spirits, where good and evil wage a never-ending tug of war. Willie's mother, Mary Fields, died 4 years later, and his sharecropper father, George Johnson, pulled stakes for Marlin, Texas, where every Sunday he and his boy would witness the preaching and singing, the stomping and hollering at the Church of God in Christ, intoxicating young Willie and fueling his desire to take the pulpit by storm and one day become a Baptist minister. At 5 years old, his father presented him with a cigar box guitar, and the spell was cast. Only one photograph of Blind Willie Johnson exists, and his time on earth remains hazy, though historians have connected what dots there are. Born sighted, theories of his blindness developed, but the account recollected by Willie's widow Angeline was mostly agreed upon. One day, as George and his new bride fought violently regarding her cheating ways, the enraged stepmother splashed lye in young Willie's face, blinding the 7-year-old. It's become a punchline, the blind blues musician, but in truth there were many blind blues singers back when. Blind Willie McTell, Sonny Terry, Blind Boy Fuller, Reverend Gary Davis, Blind Blake, Sleepy John Estes, Blind Lemon Jefferson. Those sightless practitioners could crawl right up into a song and inhabit it in a way that those of us encumbered by sight simply cannot. Young Willie was influenced by another blind musician he'd met named Madkin Butler, who possessed a powerful singing and preaching style. And Willie took to the dusty street corners, singing religious songs with a tin cup wired to the neck of his Stella guitar for tip money. Johnson became a well-known evangelist and fostered his own singular style of delivering his gospel-fused songs, featuring powerful chest voice singing and a remarkable bottleneck slide guitar technique and syncopation, substituting a pocket knife for a bottleneck and inspiring no less than Robert Johnson and Howlin' Wolf, who would influence countless others. His harsh, gravelly bass voice was described by blues writer Mark Macon as sounding like hell and damnation. Blind Willie composed many hauntingly powerful songs, iconic staples of the American songbook. Motherless Children Have a Hard Time, John the Revelator, Soul of a Man, Jesus Make Up My Dying Bed. Folk, blues, and rock performers from Peter, Paul, and Mary to Led Zeppelin covered them. Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground was called the most transcendent piece in all American music by Ronnie Cooder. Eric Clapton described It's Nobody's Fault But Mine as probably the finest slide guitar playing you'll ever hear. When Willie sang, it felt like the songs needed to be expelled lest they catch fire and burn him down from the inside out. Once in New Orleans, he was arrested in front of the federal custom house for allegedly attempting to incite a riot with his fervid rendition of If I Had My Way, I'd Tear the Building Down. Around 1926, Johnson married Willie B. Harris, who sang with him on the street and at benefits. In December of 1927, they journeyed to the Deep Ellum neighborhood in Dallas to record sides for Columbia Records in a temporary studio. 6 songs were cut, with over 15,000 pressings of the first 2 sides being released, a substantial success. Though Johnson was paid a bonus to forfeit royalties from sales. In 1928, blues critic Edward A. Niles lauded Johnson's violent, tortured, and abysmal shouts and groans and his inspired guitar playing. Over the next 3 years, Johnson would record 3 more times, in Dallas, New Orleans, and Atlanta. By the final 1930 session, only 800 copies of the chosen single were pressed, as a depression now had its foot firmly on the throat of Johnson's audience. Blind Willie's entire catalog consists of 30 songs. Years after the Kalamazoo episode, while I was making a record, an uninvited 11th hour song materialized, born of heartache, flood, mosquitoes, lust, fever, drunkenness, and desolation, titled Blanket Full of Bees. During this period, I was entranced by a steady diet of Blind Willie Johnson, his potent tales of doom and salvation proving both soothing and unsettling. I wanted to send up a nod, doing so at the end of my song, by fading in about 30 seconds of Blind Willie singing, Lord, I just can't keep from crying sometimes, with my heart full of sorrow and my eyes full of tears. Searching for publishing rights to satisfy legal obligations, I found nothing. But a bigger quandary now confounded me. Who the hell was I to borrow his song to profess any kinship to this music? Did authentic blues and gospel music belong solely to a particular race and class, one that a spoiled white suburban yahoo surely had no real connection with? And just what are the blues? Surely it's more than the vapid guitar histrionics often hiding behind that term today. It seems a nebulous thing, unfitting of definition. Doesn't the smell of smoke or the sound of thunder conjure something different in all of us? Everyone has a blanket full of bees. Johnson remarried in the early 1930s, settling in Beaumont, performing around town and singing at the Mount Olive Baptist Church with his new wife Angeline, occasionally journeying to Houston or elsewhere. Some say he operated his own house of prayer. Around 1945, his house was destroyed by fire, but with nowhere else to go, they lived in the charred remains. Soon, Willie, exposed to the elements, became sick, but was refused admittance to the hospital, according to Angeline, due to his blindness or perhaps being black. Not long after, he died of malarial fever and/or pneumonia and was buried in Blanchette Cemetery, gravesite unknown. When the stars align, I bet you can still hear his tin can clanking, his faint, mournful wails floating like steam in the fat Texas air. When astronomer Carl Sagan and his colleagues were tasked with choosing songs to include on the Voyager spacecraft in 1977, Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground was among the selections. Included because, according to Sagan, quote, Johnson's song concerns a situation he faced many times, nightfall with no place to sleep. Since humans appeared on Earth, the shroud of night has yet to fall without touching a man or woman in the same plight. End quote. Ultimately, I left Blind Willie's song on my recording, figuring if it spurred even one soul to investigate the ghostly rasping, it was justified. My credits read, Blind Willie Johnson used courtesy of God. Nobody sued me.